All right. Eric. Eric, your seat is in the middle. I saved it with the sauce. Yes. I'll be the timekeeper. It's recording.
On n'a pas assez d'équipement pour nos amis anglophones. Alors, si vous avez des commentaires, vous posez des questions, phrase par phrase, on va bien sort consécutif. Peut-être pas la dispo, parce que moi, je ne peux pas me rappeler, malheureusement.
Okay. Everybody inside who's going to participate? Eric, okay. Okay, more right here. So, real quick, if you need to go to, if you need the restrooms, they are back here. Right, on the other side of the elevator. So if anyone is needing the restroom, you can go ahead and go and now if you like. And they're right here on the other side of the elevator. Okay. So welcome again. We are going to get started today with this very much needed conversation about the civil rights in marginalized communities and just having an overall discussion with one another. My name is Clarice Abdul-Bay. I am one of the conveners of the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement. We have an interpreter, right? Okay, okay. Just want to make sure I slow down if I need to. This is Kwame Abdul-Bay. He spoke earlier, my partner in Life and Injustice. And this week is the 5th annual day of the National Day of Racial Healing, week of the National. And of course, bridge gaps between racial divides. We come together for truth, racial healing, and transformation. And this conversation with you is very, very important to us. So we welcome you and we thank you for participating today. If you're wondering where Benito White is, his mother, he is taking care of his mother. He has not been here since, I think, Christmas. And so he called us the other night and told us that he regretfully will not be able to make it back in time to meet all of you for the first time or again. And so I definitely send him and his family some good energy. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator for today, and then we'll get started. Eric Wibblehouse-Braun, I say it right? Associate Professor of the University of Arkansas in Little Rock, is the author of 3 books and over 24 articles, and book 24 articles and book chapters on justice, human rights, and peace building. From Africa to North America, he examines the politics around how societies deal with histories of violence and repression. His newest book is Exploring the True Commission Recommendations in a Comparative Perspective. And it was released 2022, just last year. So please help me welcome Eric Wibblehouse-Braun, Professor. And I'm going to pass it to you. Thank you.
You want me to go up there? No, okay. I'm so thrilled to be here with everyone. I see this as a tremendous opportunity to learn myself. And the topic is an important one. It's one that societies around the world struggle with. So the type of work that I do and the academic practitioner role often goes by the term of transitional justice. Many of you have probably heard this term. It's a term that's really out of style. It doesn't really make sense anymore. When academics and policymakers and activists started to use this term, it was in the 1990s, in the early 1990s. And at that time, well, I wasn't around then, at least not as an academic. I was on the earth. It started to be really interested in what was happening as democratic transitions were happening, beginning in the latter part of the 1970s. First in Southern Europe, where it had democratic transitions happening in Spain, Portugal, and Greece. Then into the 1980s, where transitions happening in Latin America, some parts of Asia, and then into the early 90s, happening more in sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of Asia and then Eastern Europe, collapse of the Soviet Union. In many of these instances, what was happening was there was an authoritarian regime that was in place, and there was a process of a democratic transition. There was at least an attempt to form a government that was more democratic in nature. And so, in many of these contexts, there was a tremendous desire to pursue justice in its myriad forms, whether it's in terms of retribution, punishing those who were responsible for wrongdoing, or trying to restore relationships between individuals and communities, or trying to repair the harm that was done, or which is probably more relevant to our topic today, ideas of what they call transformative justice. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, so most of what people were observing was that these debates and discussions about justice coincided with transition, or an attempted transition. Right? So that's why the adjective transitional got attached to justice in this context. But as we get later into the 1990s and up to the present, countries, communities were dealing with the
were dealing with their pasts were doing so at times that really connected to transition. There are instances where there was a civil war going on, and there was an attempt to try to move to peace, but there were still demands to deal with what happened during the civil war. By really the beginning of the 21st century, roughly speaking, it arguably became a norm for that this is what countries did. Like, this is what a good country in the world did to deal with its past. It talked about its past and tried to deal with it in some way. So arguably, as an international relations scholar, we have to talk about these norms that exist internationally, where countries that want to be seen as good governments or good members of the international community want legitimacy from elsewhere, that they generally try to comply with these norms. So over the past 20 years, we've seen countries that arguably have no kind of demonstrable transition happening, that are still confronting their past in different ways, and including here in the United States, where in lots of different ways that Clarice Kwame, among others, can talk in more detail, in which many of us are trying to prompt a reckoning with our own history here. So, what does it mean in terms of particularly trying to promote justice for marginalized communities? The first observation I would make is that a lot of the academic research and a lot of the attention that's paid by policymakers is really focusing on things that are happening at the elite level. They're happening in capital cities that are involving political, economic, social elites. Almost by definition, people from marginalized communities are not in those conversations. So this creates a challenge. I think partially as a result of this, policymakers, academics don't pay attention to some things that are happening at what we might call the grassroots level, or local level activity. It's not as visible. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. And I think, I hypothesize, and I'd love to hear that, I think many of you in this room have some great examples that are being overlooked. Something as simple as developing some kind of community economic activity, creating a bakery or something like that, that brings people together from different communities and just gets them interacting in ways that ostensibly have nothing to do with the past, but help to build these relationships. A friend of mine has done some research and published a book recently on this idea of what she calls thin sympathy. Thin sympathy, so like in a very narrow sense. And so what she argues in the book is that before all the things that, like the big flashy activity that tends to get labeled transitional justice by academics like me, things like creating nationwide truth and reconciliation commissions, or enacting massive reparations programs, or having a series of trials to punish people. I mean, all these things are get headlines and are very. I'm not saying that they're not meaningful, but what she argues is that really for those things to ultimately be successful, by which she means to really transform society, reshape relationships between people from different groups and different communities, whatever those divisions are that are in that society. Before all those big things can really be successful, there needs to be at a very basic level a sense of understanding what happened and what did people from that other group, what did they experience, And what were the consequences of that experience? And so if there's some kind of very basic level education, and I don't mean that in a formal sense, something in schools necessarily, but that basic knowledge needs to be there for people to understand the perspectives of people from other groups. Where we are, where I think the discussion in an academic sense of that right now is, okay, well, how do we do that? I don't know. I think there are good examples that are out there. Again, often very localized ones. We need to share those experiences. My goal is that maybe we learn about some of those here today. The last thing I'll say, and then I've talked far too much, is I mentioned this idea of transformative justice. Critics of how, I'll use the term transitional justice, but critics of how transitional justice is usually done argue that the pursuit of justice, as it usually happens, does not lead to transformation of a society. It does not address the marginalization of groups within society. It does not address the underlying causes, the root causes, the deep historical causes of the tension or the violence or whatever it is that's still lingering in that society. And until those that situate those underlying socioeconomic root causes, until those things are addressed, really can't have real justice. And people who have been marginalized, if they're not playing on a level playing field politically, you can't have justice in the long run. We ultimately can't have peace, in the positive sense of the term. Right? The peace in the negative sense being that there's not violence happening, but peace in a more positive sense being that we've got positive supportive relationships across communities. So I'm excited to be here with everybody. I'm excited to hear about your thoughts and things that you've observed in your own communities about how we can help support and promote justice, in particular for marginalized communities.
If I want to say something, if you speak, try to project, because we have this one mic here, so we want to make sure that it's able to pick you up and the folks on the live can also hear your question, your statement.
Merci.
Thank you.
Je n'ai pas une voix qui porte malheureusement, je vais enlever mon masque.
Unfortunately, I don't have a loud voice, so I've taken off my mask.
Je suis Merveille Bozo. Je viens de la République démocratique du Congo.
My name is Merveille Bozo from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Je suis avocate et bien évidemment la question de justice transitionnelle de façon.
I'm a lawyer, and so of course this question of transitional justice is very interesting to me.
Alors, dans notre pays, nous sommes effectivement dans une transition parce que il y a de cela 20 ans, beaucoup de crimes se sont passés notamment en viol.
So in my country, we are in a transition. About 20 years ago, many crimes took place, including rape.
Et les chercheurs congolais, avec plusieurs organisations qui s'occupent des femmes violées, réfléchissent sur comment quitter le principe de justice transitionnelle, le concept de justice transitionnelle, pour amener un nouveau concept de justice transformationnelle.
Now, there are a lot of researchers in my country who work with organizations that take care of women who have experienced rape. And these researchers and organizations are thinking about how we can move away from this question of transitional justice toward this idea of transformative justice.
Parce que il ne faut pas seulement réparer, bien sûr, il n'y a pas de paix sans réparation de justice, mais il faut transformer, faire en sorte que ces personnes qui ont été déshumanisées puissent se retrouver, puissent se réinsérer dans la société.
Now, we can't just talk about reparations, and of course, there is no peace without reparations and without repair, but people who have experienced these dehumanizing things need to be reintegrated into society also.
Alors, du point de vue de la preuve, parce que il n'y a pas de justice sans preuve.
Now, I'd like to say something about evidence because there's no justice without evidence.
Comment se comporter face à une histoire ou à une situation dans les preuves, la majorité des preuves qui peuvent constituer des éléments probants pour amener à la justice ne sont pas connus ou sont classés secrets.
But how can we move forward in a situation where most pieces of evidence that could be used in the justice system are unknown or are classified as secret?
Yeah, well, that's a fantastic question. I mean, that would be justice in a prosecutorial sense. There, it's one of possibly be different kinds of justice that could be pursued. But may not have the same evidentiary requirements. If we're talking about some kind of preparation or access to some kind of reintegration, there may be difficult questions. Which then may raise issues about evidence. Someone would have to prove that if they experienced rape or whatever crime reparations are focused on trying to address. But people have to prove that that they should be eligible. That can create challenges and practical things to address.
Okay. Well, the question you asked is a very good question. The first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so South Africa, Rwanda had a similar problem, but they were able to create a way around it, I guess, Eric. So how would we take those two examples and then apply it to what she's talking about? To her question.
I would say, I mean, there are some similarities, but also differences. In some way, I think it can come back to that perhaps long-winded comments that I made about the need for transition. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, there's still in the eastern parts of the country, we still don't have that stability. There are problems of security and governance with some kind of authority to be able to project power and to create these kinds of programs. South Africa did not have, in the early 1990s, mass violence to the extent that it disrupted government services, those kinds of things. In Rwanda, there was mass violence, but by the time was dealing with it, there had been peace. The Rwanda patriotic front won the war, and there was peace there. So I think part of the difficulty of taking those Rwanda and South Africa as an example is that the political situation, the degree of stability is different. There's going to be a different set of challenges to implement some in this context.
I was just going to say, it's a really interesting question, and when we talk about
the need for proof when it comes to rape or when we think about the history of those serious issues in our country, it's very complicated as well. We have a very big problem on college campuses in which most of the time it's just women who have been victims of sexual assault and they have had no proof, right? And so you look at the frame of power in that situation, who is the perpetrator and who is the person who is perpetrated against, and what are we asking them to do in order to prove what happened, right? But you also have a complicated history of that when it came to the Jim Crow era, when it came to women saying that black men had perpetuated assault against them, and who is the victim in that situation, right? So we have a long history of how to address sexual assault and who to prove, right? And I think the frame of what we're asking for proof needs to be really re-examined because we are being traumatized, but we also have to figure out a way to be enforcement.
To bring that more explicitly back to our theme about marginalized communities, whether it's in the Jim Crow South or on college campuses or in the history of DRC, one of the things that also need to be cognizant of is the identity of the victim and the identity of investigators, administrators for making these decisions. Did I say investigators? So, and where those differences are salient along racial lines or ethnic lines, has strong implications for whether people are willing to come forward, whether stories are believed. Absolutely. What other examples of your experiences about needs for transformation, and powerful examples of in which you've seen some measure of justice for marginalized communities?
Sorry, my name is Linda. I'm from Namibia. I think for me, the whole, but I come from a country that is quite, when we went through the process, we were colonized by 3 different countries. Oh, yes, first the British, then the Germans, then South Africans, the African. So, just to get it out. Okay. So already those 3 years already says about the amount of violence that we've experienced. And I think as a country, we are very diplomatic and we are trying to ensure that no civil war or anything happens in our country. And as much as that transitional process has taken place, we still see the power vested within the YGs in my country. And when justice is, and I'm putting it in the comments, when justice is served for us black women, it's completely different. Then I have another layer. For not just being black, coming from a particular ethnic group, there's also another layer of oppression that we experience. Then my queerness comes in, it's another layer that is unspoken yet don't dare try speaking about it because it's Western. So it goes back to the colonizer who needs to come and explain on our behalf while some of us were not even part of that process. We were just born in the process of oppression at that time. So it's quite you can see the change, you can see the growth, but you can also see the limitation that comes with it. So currently my country is fighting with the Germans around reparations because they've all our skulls in their country. They're refusing to bring back our ancestors. They are refusing to apologize and take responsibility. So we still have to deal with it. And it's not going to stop until they bring back our ancestors. But at the same time, I find the Western world trying to be nice, especially us in the NGO world. we get money from international donors. And sometimes I feel, and especially you Americans, sorry. Especially the Americans do not, well, they invest a lot in health and HIV because you have the President's Fund that is supposed to be funding that. But you do not really see proper investment where you can say, this is to help us move through a transitional process that gets us to become autonomous and claim agency there. Then that's why sometimes when I look at funding even NGOs, even if it's that $2,000, which is a lot of money now, currently, it's like a lot of money. It's like over 100,000 in my, it could be 100,000 in my country, which means you can see, you can do programs, you can do a lot of work. But then you again need to look like you are counting every cent in a way that you have to explain why you have to do the strategy that way. So it's like you are again going back to your oppressor, and that oppressor still governs you in some way because that contract is still so black and white in such a way that you don't have a say. So, and those are realities that we face. Being on this program opens up my mind around how the reality is in the US compared to how we see it from home. Yeah. It shows to me that they being black and of color, that there is an evolution that is moving in this part of the world. And I think that is something that is not given to us to know that that black people are being given an opportunity to craft their own agency and story. We just look at the Americans and the Western world to say you're coming to point us. But I see here now in this program that no, the black voice matters. But when we talk around the table to negotiate an agreement, your black voice is so small that you feel the white man says more. And at the end of the day, I don't really know the transitioning process that we're trying to move into, the transformation of autonomy for us, again gets compromised. So I'm not sure whether I'm really addressing the matter, but I think for me it's a bigger issue of oppression. But also we still see the white man as the master. And it's something, it's a doctrine that needs to get out of our system. But also it's also about the way they carry on a train in our countries, because when you're foreign, it's like you come with all the knowledge, all the intelligence, everything, the toolbox is with you. While we're supposed to build the toolbox together in order for us to find a way there. So yeah, so that's what I just said.
I'm much more cognizant about my position here as the moderator. Powerful comments about intersectionality and the power of and that the organizations in your countries, in this country as well, to be able to attract funding and speak a particular language and to frame justice in a particular way, often in ways that are not transformational. People with the power and the resources, they don't have an interest in transformation.
First of all, I'm not you Americans. But one thing, when you brought up the oppressive nature of funding NGOs, since we run a nonprofit, we completely understand that. That's why we don't accept any money inside of the state of Arkansas. We only accept money outside of Arkansas because all money inside Arkansas is tainted. What I would like to do, since the US dollar goes so far in your community, I would like to talk to you before you leave about us making a $500 donation to your NGO without any strings attached, so you can do what you do.
What we do, I studied at the School of Public Service here in Little Rock, that's what brought me to Little Rock. And we learn a lot about transactional aid, which is kind of what I'm hearing you talk about it. A lot of books are being written about it dead age. We watch a lot of videos about how just throwing money into other countries and having these strings attached is not a way for transformation. I'm wondering, just from your point of view, in terms of storytelling communication, what can we say here and talk about here about Namibia to help change the narrative of what is needed or how, if this country is going to help, how we can go about doing that better?
I think the first thing for me is, yes, when it comes to, for instance, funding, there is a framework that is given about how you, what types of proposals are that is supposed to be submitted. But I think once the proposal is accepted, that whole process of dialogue it becomes a problem because there's no personalization from the other end. Really listen to the realities that they're bringing across. Make an example, I'm supposed to train LGBTQ women on human rights, meaning that the instruments nationally, regionally, and internationally. But then we have a community that says to you, please first come in our community, walk around with us, and see the reality. Because you have now submitted a proposal of training, but we tell you to come in a dialogue with us first. And from that dialogue, I'm creating a survey to assess my community needs. I come back to you and I say, wait, I've taken a few steps back. This is my data that comes out. I need to rearrange my training approach so I can first speak the language, get my community to affirm the principles of human rights, and then move into the needs of what is my call to action.
Yes.
And then we end up having a left, right, and center because you are sticking to the agreement. I'm telling you the story. And you and I'm currently we're facing that challenge right now. We're at a point to tell the Americans, take your money back, we don't need it. Because that's what you've done with funders. You tell them, look, we'll give you a comprehensive report on how we do it. Because sometimes when you're in the office, you see a call, you go for it. You realize what the needs are and everything, but when you go to your community, the flip comes up. At least I'm giving you triple data to give you analysis. But also, and I'll still implement your human rights training. But then I have a back and forth, and I'm asking, can we please have a call? And the team at the other end is not willing to make time for us to just connect, because sometimes the voices connect better than the email.
Yes.
And I think that's where the challenge is. It's about really donors need to be able to make time to get to know us. And sometimes stop being in your offices, come down to us also for change. Come sit with us around the fire and feel. Walk with us in the darkness and feel the realities of what we are feeling. Then go home and then we'll make you sleep in the ghetto that we are having there so you can feel how the people are sleeping. So you can just connect. And I think that's where the marginalization is layered again because you're sitting in this office, I'm sitting there on the ground, we are not connecting. My English, your English, becomes, you come with your academic language, and I'm like, I'm very simple, I'm just languages. So at the end of the day, for me, it's about really moving a little bit from the contract agreement, look at the activity and say, how did you guys envisage this to happen? So you can just feel how we do process. Sometimes you're telling me one training, and in that one training resources, I make 3 other trainings out of it because I can expand them to the extent that one training is not enough to be in a community. It's just, I feel like that's like giving a child one spoon of ice cream. The child wants more, you say, no, you're gonna have bread now. And while the taste is still nice in my mouth, I want the second spoon to be able to go to the next level. Then you want me to give you all the human rights violations, but you can't take the story from someone and not go back to be able to see how the progress is and how it has changed and affected their lives. So there's quite a number of realities that we all live experiencing. But yeah.
We are completely out of time. We want to give you guys an opportunity to take your food back to your room before you go to your next appointment. So I'm going to give the floor to our daughter, Dreamer, to say the final words.
Hello. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come to this event and to speak their minds. I wish we had more time because I feel like this conversation is going to go in a very wonderful way. But I've learned a lot just in this past couple of minutes, sitting and listening to you guys and the work that you do. It's very beautiful. And I appreciate you for sharing your light and your mission with the world. And I pray that you keep going no matter what. I know this work is hard, but it's worth it. And I just want to thank the people, the department of the state for bringing everybody to school to come sit with us and have these conversations. And moderator for saying this piece, and for you as well, for saying what you felt like you need to say. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you guys have blessed travels and a blessed stay in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're happy to have you. Thank you.
We have all of your contact information, so this conversation is just the beginning. So we'll stay in contact. Okay? Oh.
Thank you, Afro Life.